Hey everyone, welcome. We hope you guys have been having fun at RevCon so far. We have Jennifer Smith today, CEO and co-founder of Scribe, here to teach us how to sell like a CEO. Yeah, take it away,
Hi.
Jennifer.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Really great to be here. The title of the session is How to Sell Like a CEO. It should probably be titled How to Sell from First Principles, because I have no classic or formal training in sales. And yet, the thing that I do day in and day out is sell constantly, whether that's to customers, investors, or internal folks. So I'll share a little bit more about my background, mostly so you can understand my biases and where I'm sort of coming from in all of this. And then I'll throw up a slide and share some tactical, practical tips of how I think about selling and other CEOs that I know how they think about selling and what that means for folks who are in sales roles day to day and what you can, some of that stuff that you can apply yourselves. I was a management consultant at McKinsey for 7 or 8 years, worked mostly in organization and operations practices. So helping customers think about how do you be more efficient in what you do. So I have a huge efficiency bias, which you'll see come out. I then went into venture capital. I was at a firm called Greylock Partners on the enterprise software side. While I was there, I got really interested in how software gets bought. So especially in Silicon Valley, I think we talk a lot about how do we sell software? How do we build a go-to-market? How do we build a sales engine? I got really curious about what that looks like on the other side. Who are the people who are actually buying? How are they making buying decisions? What are the problems they're trying to solve for? What are they facing as a leader? What do the challenges look like in their business as they go to make software purchasing decisions? What are they evaluating? What does that criteria look like? What does that process look like? What are the parts of their tech stack that they think they have gaps today? At the time I did it mostly just out of curiosity and also as an investment firm, it helped us be smarter about where we place our bets. But it's really helped inform both what I focus on at Scribe, why I even started the company and how we think about selling. I counted when I left, I talked to over 1,200 C-level folks at Fortune 1000 companies. So a lot of CIOs, CDOs, CTOs, the type of folks who make big buying decisions around technology for their company. And I also saw our portfolio companies and companies we were considering investing in pitch to all of these people. So I've probably seen, over 100 companies pitch, well over 1,000 times at this point. And so it was really interesting. I kind of crash course for me in seeing both sides because I get to debrief with both people afterwards, right? I'd sort of sit down with the salesperson or the sales leader of the company and say, how do you think that pitch went? What were you thinking about? And then I'd get to sit down with the buyer behind closed doors and say, well, what did you really think? Like what parts of that were compelling to you and what wasn't? And it was a lot of what I heard in those conversations from buyers about what they wanted that led me to found Scribe. So Scribe, just really quickly, so you guys have context and again understand my biases and where I'm coming from, especially when I talk a lot about efficiency. Scribe, we're a Series A software company based in Silicon Valley. We make software that makes it really easy to capture and share how to do something. So we're a desktop application or a browser extension. You click the record button and you do a process, something you'd normally be doing. You're adding a lead in Salesforce as an example. You click record, you add your lead, you click stop record. Scribe will auto-generate step-by-step written instructions with screenshots on how to add a lead into Salesforce. And you can now use that to share with any colleague who's asking you a question on how to do something, or what we see a lot with sales teams that we work with, sharing with prospects who are asking them, hey, I'm getting set up on your trial, or, oh, I'd like to understand how this works better, or can you show me this? It's a way to quickly and easily send someone information on how to do something. And so I, as I mentioned, sell a lot, whether that's, talking to our investors or, most often talking to customers and trying to understand what they're doing. So, very interestingly, I've never had a formal class on sales. So I went to Harvard Business School, which is supposed to be a good one. And we had lots of classes on strategy and leadership and ethics, especially post Enron and all these sorts of things. Never once a conversation about sales. We had one sales session in the entire time, and that was a optional 1 hour session once in 2 years after class that was attended by maybe 30 people out of a class of 900. And I think that's such a huge miss because sales is what makes our economy go round, and everyone is selling all day, every day, regardless of whether you're in a formal sales capacity and you have a quota or not. So everything that I've had to learn about sales, I've learned from, I'd argue, first principles of, what are you actually trying to achieve with a customer? And then everything that I've seen, both from great mentors and literally thousands of pitches at this point of salespeople talking to buyers and being able to debrief with them afterwards. And so what I've tried to do for this session is distill down what are the ways that I think about sales differently as a CEO and coming from first principles and what have I heard from talking to other CEOs as well. And what could that mean for folks who are in a sales capacity and trying to hit quota and selling every single day. So I'm just going to share my screen with a few bullets. This is the only slide that I have. So fret not, we're not going to do death by PowerPoint here. Unfortunately, I don't have permission to share my screen. So if someone from the RevCon team is listening, if you could grant me permission, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm just gonna speak to it, and that's fine. We're not missing anything. So the first part in how to sell like a CEO or from first principles is to think like a problem solver. So I came from management consulting. In management consulting, our job is to solve problems for clients. We are literally paid millions of dollars to come in and tackle a big gnarly problem and try to solve it for them. I would argue sales is exactly the same thing. It's just the instrument that you have to solve their problem, instead of being your ideas and a PowerPoint and intellectual property as a consultant, is whatever product or service you are selling. And so I think the most effective way to do sales that I found personally is just to be curious about your buyer. What problem are you trying to solve? What are your top priorities for this year? What are you trying to achieve? What are the roadblocks that are getting in the way of that? What have you tried and what has worked and not worked? And what have you learned from that? And just to get really curious and in the flow of what is it that the customer is telling you, and almost put yourself in their shoes in the flow of that conversation. And you build sort of empathy and a sense of partnership of like, okay, now your problem is my problem and I'm with you and I'm here to solve it together. And maybe I can solve it for you and maybe I can't, right? And either outcome is okay. Hopefully I can help you, but this is going to sound weird to say because it's sales, and I recognize everyone has a quota, but it's almost about detaching from the outcome. I'll often see in sales conversations where a salesperson has sort of their pitch or their flow, and I can see in their head as they're talking to a prospect, they're just trying to go through their mental checklist and say like, oh, did I do this? Did I do that? And they're like almost waiting to ask the next question and not listening to the answer. This is flipping that the other way and saying, what if your job was just to help this person solve a problem? And you almost released your agenda. Now, you probably have a structured way of doing it, right? You've got a way of doing discovery and all of that. But what if you just put yourself in the flow in the moment of that person and just tried to solve a problem with them and sort of go along the journey of that together? And I have found in my experience that actually leads to higher conversions and better outcomes when that's not what you're trying to solve for, because then it becomes much more human, right? You're a business leader. I'm a business leader. I have some special knowledge around the problem that my product or service solves for. Sounds like that's a pain point for you. Let's talk about how that shows up for you. Let me share with you ways that I've seen other leaders be able to solve for that. And so it leads to a much deeper relationship, much more trust building, and it's much more rooted in the underlying problem and that person's agenda, not yours. When I was a consultant, we would do a lot of training sessions. And one of the kind of key pieces that they would just hammer over the head for us was release your agenda. So we would go into some kind of, client interview, and you would have an agenda. You're trying to get a certain piece of information. You're trying to solve for something. This is in like a mock training session. And the person would walk in and who was role playing, and they'd totally blow it up. They'd take you completely off topic. They'd do something different. Maybe something just landed on their desk that day that was really bothering them. And the thing they always tried to teach us was release your agenda, meet that person where they are in that moment and what they're trying to solve for, not what it is that you're trying to solve for and the outcome you're trying to generate. And I think that translates so well into sales as well. It's really about, we talk a lot about being buyer first. To me, this is about being problem first. Like, let's try to solve that problem together. The second piece is be a rapid learning machine. So what do I mean by that? This is something we talk a lot about internally at Scribe. And we're not unique in this. I'd imagine a lot of startups and even bigger companies do this all the time, which is your job is to learn as quickly as possible and to figure out the truth. What is the best way to be selling your product? Who are the right people to be selling it to? There are good customers and there are better customers, and there are some bad customers too. What's the right process to be following to do that? And so as a company, we talk a lot about how to have an experimentation framework. This works really elegantly across, our growth and our marketing and our product. For example, we'll have experimentation frameworks. If we change the color of this button and make it more prominent, will it make our conversion rates go up by X%? And I'll tell you internally, I constantly talk to our sales team about how do we be a rapid learning machine in sales as well. And the initial inclination I always get back is, well, that doesn't really apply to sales. Sales is really different, right? The feedback's different. Every customer is sort of special and it's all unique. And I actually would push back on that quite a bit and say, you can still follow an experimentation framework and arguably the best salespeople do. This is the way that I have figured out how to sell Scribe, my company, is you form a hypothesis, you place certain sets of bets, you go out and collect the data, and then you adapt. And we do that at a company level. I'm sure all the companies you guys work at do that in the same way. Do that in the way that you sell. So what does that look like? That can look like everything from more strategic. Hey, there are, our company sells to two different types of customers. I am going to sell into both customers and I'm going to rigorously track what does my conversion rate across the funnel look like for both? What does the average deal size look like? What does the time to close look like? What's the velocity? How many calls did I have to have for them? Whatever the metrics are that you care about, right? And then you can see at the end, hey, is there a difference between the two of these? And then what do you do with that information, right? Maybe it means like a certain segment of customers is actually better for you than another. Is that one that you should just be choosing to spend more of your time with? Take a look at whatever it is that you're optimizing for and say, hey, can I form a hypothesis around if I do this, then I will see that outcome with whatever it is that I'm trying to solve for, and go out and actually test it. And it's never going to look as clean and simple and neat as your fifth grade science experiment, right? But it's the way that you can constantly be learning and iterating and evolving the way that you sell, and getting you to, closing more deals, doing it at a faster amount of time with less resources on your end. And so I'd encourage everyone to like take a look at what you're doing in your pipeline right now and say, gosh, do I have a gut feeling around something, a particular kind of customer, a way that I pitch what I do, a type of collateral that I send, whatever it might be, and go see if you can design an experiment around that. That can be things as tactical and simple, and we do this all the time. And our sales team is, what collateral do I send afterwards, right? Or right before a meeting. So we'll test things. Hey, if we send an email right before a meeting and we get these 3 questions, does it mean that we're able to run the first call more effectively and have a greater conversion to the second call? Or if we send this ROI template after the second call, do we find that avoids the need for having a call with this stakeholder afterwards and we're actually able to close a deal faster? And so there are all of these moments, from the really big strategic ones, who do I talk to, down to the really tactical, what's my CTA and the email follow-up that I send, that you can be constantly testing and iterating and experimenting on. Bonus points if you're able to do this across a team, right? So if you work with 5 other sellers, let's say, ideally you could actually be learning 5 times as fast. This is not a natural muscle that I think salespeople have, because it's not a normal part of the job. But I think it can be a really effective lever, which is if you just sit and ask the person next to you, hey, like what are you doing? How are you running it this way? What's the email you're sending? Whatever it is that you're looking at, and see, like, can you guys be swapping and exchanging notes on what it is that you're learning? this is something I push all the time from a company perspective. I'm like, how do we get a force multiplier across the company of all the things that we're learning, an experiment we're running in marketing might have implications for what we design in product. The same thing is true within even a team. So are there ways that you could be learning 5 times as fast just by virtue of the people that you're sitting around and what you're getting from them? The next one is no limiting beliefs. So this is a value that we have as a company overall, and something that I talk a lot about. There was a runner. There used to be a belief in. I'm going to get into a sports analogy, which is always dangerous because I know nothing about sports, but I know enough about this one for the analogy, which is like no one had ever broken, I think, the 4 or 5 minute mile, and everyone kind of believed that there was like an upper ceiling of what was possible. That the human body cannot run any faster than this. And then a runner came along and broke that record. And it was the first time, that anything kind of close to that had happened in, a decade or two. And all of a sudden, right after that person broke that record, a whole bunch of people afterwards immediately started breaking it. And that's like an example. There could be a number of reasons for that, but I think that's an example of like someone broke a limiting belief. And then all of a sudden people looked at that and said, oh gosh, this is now possible. So if that's possible, now that I can dream the dream of what this looks like, maybe that means that I can go do it myself. And a big part of my job as a CEO is constantly pushing my teams to, how do you think bigger? How do you do more with the same amount? What are some roadblocks? Are they real roadblocks or are they just imaginary roadblocks? Right? And you find a lot of times they're actually quite imaginary. And so what does this look like for sales? This shows up in so many different ways, but I'll give you some concrete examples of ones that we've been able to do as a sales team that I think are really good examples. We've had beliefs around how big a deal could be. So as an example, we had a salesperson on my team who was working with a really big technology company, and they had a bunch of requests for things that we weren't willing to do, some customization. And she came to me and she said, well, at what cost, Jennifer, at what price would you be willing to actually do these things? And I threw out a really big number to her. And she was like, okay, I'm going to go back to the buyer and take that to him and see what he says. And I was like, no, there's no way for what he's trying to do. Like, there's no way that he'd be willing to pay that amount. Turns out that he was. We worked with him through it. She ended up closing the biggest deal that she's ever closed in her life by quite a bit. And so that's just one example. But if we had applied sort of normal reasoning, we would have never even thrown the number out there. We would have just said, sorry, we can't serve you. It's not worth it to us. And so that's just an example. There are, I think, so many of these that show up every day where we make assumptions about what the other person's trying to solve for, what they are willing or not willing to do. And oftentimes it's just a matter of asking the question. I love to ask the question. I'll give you a very simple example. Like, we've got someone on our team who creates content. And I was just meeting with him last week, and I was like, the content you're creating is really great. And we're seeing like really great results from it. What would it take for you to 4x the amount of content that you create next month? And he looked at me and he was like, 2 extra days of work of outlining this. And then like I could spin up some of this other stuff. And I think we could get it going pretty easily. It just took me asking that question for our team to be able to 4x what they're doing. And again, that's a content example that's different, but there's so many of these instances where it just takes someone asking the question for something that feels like it might be quite outside the norm, whether that's asking for the bigger deal or asking if you can shortcut a process or whatever it might be, that might actually lead to some really great results. And even if you get a no, right, you'll learn more in the process. No, I can't because of X, Y, and Z. And then you learn more about what the constraints are and how to work around from it. I'll give you another simple example. We have a template that we send out to our prospects after we have a good call with them. And we try to make it as simple and easy as possible. We rolled out something new. And I was chatting with one of our reps right after we'd rolled out this new template. And she said, Jennifer, I haven't gotten to completing it yet because I looked at it and I was like, this is going to take me 45 minutes. And I said, well, what if I told you you have 5 minutes? Could we do this in 5 minutes together? And she said, oh, no, there's absolutely no way. And I said, let's try. Let's do it together right now. And we literally put the clock on and shared our screens and completed the template in 5 minutes. It wasn't to the same degree as if she'd spent 45 minutes on it, but I bet it got us 80 to 90% there. And so that's just another kind of very simple example. But oftentimes when I look at like the work that we have to do with prospects afterwards, and you say, oh gosh, it's going to take so much time. And so you put it off, right? You say, I'm going to wait till I have a chunk of time to follow up tomorrow or the next day. What if you just got impatient and said, hey, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes, and wherever I get in 10 minutes is where we're going to be with this. And that's what I'm going to send out. That is a questioning, limiting belief. And I would argue like will get you to almost just as good of an outcome and a better outcome because it's done now versus later. I'll give you maybe one more final example of this, which is like we've questioned also the velocity of how how we sell, right? So we looked at our average time to close, and it was higher than we would like it to be. And so we looked at it and said, well, what if we could have this? What if we could actually drop this down 1/3 of what it is right now? What would that look like? What would be a much higher velocity be? And originally, like a number of our reps said, no, that's not possible. That's just not the way these customers buy. And we had a couple reps who said like, nope, I think that I can do it. And they started going out and proving it. And they closed a few deals really quickly in a new high velocity motion. And then we had some others who looked at that and said, oh, well, now that I see that it's possible, like I guess that it is, and I guess that I'll do it. And so the thing I always have to do as a CEO is like be that example or find that example and push people. And the thing that I would encourage anyone who's in a sales role to do is you should do that. Act like a CEO. Salespeople are CEOs. You are a CEO. You own your own profit and loss. You work with your customers. You should be, challenging and questioning your own assumptions about what's possible and how you run your business and in how your customers work. I mean, you should feel just as empowered to sort of ask them questions. If they say, hey, our process usually takes us 12 weeks to go through this, you can say, well, what would it take if we wanted it to do it in 4? Like what could that look like? And they may come back and say, no, it's structurally not possible. Or they might say, oh, you know what? Actually, we could parallel process 1, 2, and 3, and they could happen at the same time. So a lot of it is just about, asking the right questions. The last and final fourth bullet point is ruthlessly focus on efficiency. I call this scaling yourself. So I shared at the beginning my background and my biases. I had a professor in business school who once said, find the thing about yourself you're constantly apologizing for and find a way to get paid for it. And to me, that's an obsession with efficiency. So I am always thinking about how do I spend my time on the parts that I think are highest leverage for me? How do I make sure my company is spending time on the things that are unique to us? And, through our product, that's really what Scribe is all about, is how do we make it so people spend time doing the stuff that they're really good at and they're able to throw away the rest. The whole kind of ethos behind Scribe is there's something special that you know how to do. We should make it really easy for you to be able to capture and share that. It should be automatic, no more work than what you already are doing in your normal day to day. But you should be able to scale that information, that knowledge, that special sauce that you have to other people and do it in a way that is easy and automatic. And so when you think about, scaling yourself and finding leverage points, there's a number of different ways in which that can manifest. To me, the headline there is figure out what your special sauce is. Hint, if you're in sales, it's selling, it's building relationships with customers. Take a look at your calendar and figure out how do you spend as much of your time doing that special sauce and throw away and by throw away, I mean delegate or automate away everything else. And so that can look like everything from, as an example on answering questions from customers or colleagues, like send a Scribe, right? Next time a customer says, hey, wait, can you show me how you do this in the software? I'm really trying to understand it better. Like maybe you write out a really long email to them. Maybe you hop on a lengthy Zoom. Maybe you can just shoot them a Scribe or a video or whatever collateral you already have. Kind of similarly, when you think about what are the common like activities you do throughout a sales process, I'll share examples for me. I've created templates for what I send before. I do this in Superhuman for what I send before a sales call and what I send after a sales call and what I send when a deal has been closed. And so I just Command K, pull up the template. It takes me 3 minutes to be able to customize it to whatever's happening there, and I'm able to send it off. And by the way, I'm sharing those with other people on my team, and they're sharing it with me. And so we're able to kind of learn from each other and getting better at those templates. Just my point earlier about experimentation. But it's really about like finding what are those efficiency moments. And then it's about being, I'd say, really greedy with your time. Your time is your most precious commodity and asset. I always feel like I don't have enough time in the day. I think that's something that everyone can relate to. And so where you choose to spend your time is, I'd argue, the most important decision you have. So step one, spend your time doing as much of what you've got on your special sauce and try to delegate or get rid of everything else. And then two is where you are spending time on that special sauce, make sure it's the highest leverage part. One of the things that I commonly saw when I was talking to buyers and seeing so many companies pitch is buyers are not all created equally. There are some buyers who are way more likely to buy. They are just better customers. They will get to the aha moment faster. They will be more willing to take a bet on you, especially if you're in a, emerging category or you're working at a startup or something that hasn't built out a big brand yet. Customers are not created equally. And so over time, I could start to see like who are the better ones. And you start to notice some pretty obvious leading indicators, right? Like if they ask you in, the first call, well, how do I know if your company's still going to be around in a few years? Big flashing red sign. That's not a good customer. Don't spend time with them. And those will look different, for every business. I'm sure you have started to notice these patterns already. Like what is the difference between the tire kickers and the people who are actually, ready to buy, and orient your time towards the latter. And try to be, a big part of that is like doing that pattern recognition over time. And so sort of building in like, where can you stop and reflect on who you've talked to and the patterns that you're starting to recognize? You can start designing sort of experiments against those as well, right? I realized that we're coming up on time, and I wanted to allow folks to ask any questions. So if there's anything that you want to ask or share, please feel free to put that into the chat or the Q&A. Maybe as if folks don't have any questions or as you're writing it in, I'm just making sure that there wasn't a question that came in. I'll share kind of like a last reflection for me sort of on my sales journey and how I've come to love sales. I think if you had asked me 10 years ago, Jennifer, will you spend most of your time selling and will you enjoy it? I would have probably said absolutely not. And now it's my favorite part of my day. And it's because I believe really strongly in what it is that I'm selling, right? I believe in my product. And most importantly, I really care about solving problems for my customers and really just getting to know them and who they are as people and what makes them tick, and being part of making them more effective at their job, making their job better, making their job more enjoyable for them. And so for me, it's almost like just being in this helping role where I'm kind of partnering with a number of different people and just making their lives a little bit easier and building some great relationships along the way. And so for me, it's all about like, what's the mindset going into those conversations and what is it that gives me joy and energy as part of that, and identifying that is sort of like my mission statement and why I do sales. I'm sure every salesperson kind of has their own why, and the why is not quota, right? The why is like, why did you get into this in the first place? And then going back and always asking yourself, like, why did I get into this for the first place? What's important to me? And how do I make sure that I orient my time around that? I saw a question from Brandy. Can you repeat the name of the fourth one? It's about scaling yourself. So being ruthlessly efficient with your time. I think we're out of time. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining.